Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick. Grace Alonso, Season 2, Episode 3, Chapter 16, The Watcher in the Woods.
Yes, and the woods are a heavy theme.
Yes, totally. I want to get this out of the way real quick. The Archie Comics shout outs of the week. I hadn't mentioned before, they had a superhero imprint for a while that was called Red Circle. And they had a superhero group that the name just flew right out of my head, but one of the members was Black Mask. And then on top of that, one of the Archie TV cartoons in the 70s featured a bunch of wacky monsters named the Groovy Ghoulies.
The Ghoulies, okay. It's all making sense, and I like that you noticed that because I'm sure that no one from my generation has. And it's important because they put in there for a reason, and I think you're that main reason.
Yeah, exactly. For the old fucks who grew up reading old school Archie, like we, go, oh, I know what that is.
So this was a really good episode, I felt, because we got to see how some of the supporting characters are dealing with the trauma in Riverdale right now. Specifically, Kevin, I thought had a really interesting role in this episode and a good discussion about sexuality. Homosexuality in a small town, something we can sort of both relate to, and they dealt with it very well.
The idea that a network TV show would have a gay character who is a teenager, who is sexually active, who is cruising, and who can have conversations about it blows my mind. Like, 10 years ago, that would have been unheard of.
Right, or what would have happened was when we have Betty and Cheryl confronting him in the woods saying, you shouldn't do this. He would sort of have this,
you're right.
Yeah, you're right, very Degrassi, like what am I doing? And I liked the retort that they gave Kevin, sort of giving this character his own agency is something I really liked about Riverdale, how they take care of those side characters.
And there are two issues going on here that Kevin eventually realizes, but I don't think that Betty ever does, which is it's one thing it's the ew, gay sex out in the woods issue, and the oh wait, there's a murderer in the woods issue. Right. And those are two separate things, And I think that for a lot of the characters who are just kind of being a little slut shamey, like they aren't separating them well enough. And he's like, look, this is a small town. There aren't a lot of outlets here. I'm gonna fuck in the woods if I can fuck in the woods. But at the same time, okay, yes, right, there is the Black Mask here, so maybe I shouldn't fuck in the woods right now.
And you see him have that moment where I was mad for a minute when I thought that he actually was stabbed.
Me too,
but indeed it was sort of just a premonition.
Yeah, totally. And that scene, if y'all haven't seen Beach Rats, like the guy with the hat down in the car, that is so right out of Beach Rats. It's amazing.
It is really creepy.
Yeah, no, I thought they were gonna Matthew Shepard him, so I was very happy that he walked away from that. But I like how complicated that it got, and I like that it leads to the conversation with his dad, and that now he's not talking to Betty. It's like, this is interesting stuff.
Yeah, and it's a realistic dynamic. Let's back up a little bit.
I was gonna say, and that's just like a facet of this episode.
There was a lot going on. A lot happening. Good news is that Moose and Midge survived. Both of them survived.
Yes. And that Moose, like I said, bisexual, I think, like clearly, cares for Midge, but doesn't regret having gone off to the woods with Kevin and is willing to be somebody for Kevin to talk to, which is important because it's been established in this episode that, it's, again, small town.
Well, Kevin's kind of feels lonely and isolated in his internal struggle, for lack of a better word. It's not like he's struggling with his sexuality, but he's struggling to find a place for him in this town that he does like, but he's outgrowing pretty quickly.
Right, and I'm sure like he's obviously not the only gay guy in town because somebody else is in those woods, but he's probably one of the few only out ones, and so that's a whole thing. Anyway, enough about Kevin, he's fascinating, but we'll move on. The lodges, they are really getting soapy, but like threateningly creepy.
Possessed?
Hermione is a battered wife. Hermione is, she is psychologically at least abused, and she is terrified of him, but also like making sure that his word is law, and like she is almost sort of reveling in the fact that Veronica is figuring out slowly what a shit he is. And but is making no efforts to save her from that.
Yeah, she's making no efforts to save her from it. I actually think she relishes these realizations that Veronica has of, this is not a good man.
Right. But she's clearly afraid to say it out loud. Again, that's where the abuse comes in.
Yeah, well, I would say even further, it's sort of like this totem pole of power in the Lodge household, where you have Hiram, Hermione, Veronica. And even though Hermione and Veronica have so much less power than Hiram, you still see Hermione just like whenever she can have this dramatic dynasty-esque sort of monologue while swishing her wine to Veronica, just reminding her like, bitch, know your place.
Right.
She loves to do that. And so I think that we do see this broken, battered woman who has been psychologically abused for years and years and years, and who does take it out on Veronica, who to her credit is more hard-headed, stubborn, and has such a good support system around her in Archie, Jughead, Betty, her friends, this core friend group that she has, which Hermione doesn't. So Hermione's just straight up spiraling. I mentioned in the last episode, they were buddies. I really loved their dynamic in season 1. And
but now Daddy's home.
Daddy's home, it's a whole different sort of dynamic.
And I had to, one thing that I'm really enjoying that I started noticing last night, maybe it's been happening all along, but the actress who plays Veronica, I don't know if it's her eyes, if it's the camera angle, but she looks like the earliest iterations of Veronica. Like if you see the old like 40s, 50s Archie comics before the characters get kind of streamlined as they did later, she looks exactly like those drawings. It's pretty, there are moments, there are individual shots from like, it almost feels like it's a rotoscope or something.
Yeah, she definitely is intense, which I think lends itself nicely to the character. Another thing we see from Veronica in this episode is that she invites Archie over to dinner, meet the fam. What could go wrong?
Yeah, so that's again, speaking of the whole power dynamics, there's a whole like, you can come in the study, you cannot come in the study, you know? And Hiram obviously has some intent to stoke Archie's vigilantism, which, you know, Hiram's the guy who hired the serpents to fuck up the drive-in so that he could get that property cheap. Heaven only knows what his agenda is for for getting the red circle to be more of a thing now.
Yeah, and I really had to laugh at the red circle video that we saw at the end, because it could have been the beginning to a very entertaining porno. It could have been. It really could have been. I mean, like what, you know, frat boys gone wild is what it looked like. Because you have all these guys,
shirtless dudes with ski masks on.
Yeah, it wasn't the most intimidating. It's I like Archie a lot. I've never found him particularly intimidating because he is so sort of deer in the headlights with a lot of situations. So red circle, I'm gonna have to be sold on a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean, Archie is archetypally sort of like the sweet teenage boy. And
boy next door.
Yeah, you know, of course we have a conversation about like the potential of guns and violence. Bring in Dilton, you know.
I know, that's the one. I said at the jump of this that I really like how they treat the supporting characters. Not Dilton though.
Yeah, give Dilton something besides the guns, please. Riverdale, I beg you.
Well, so from Riverdale, we see a little bit of Southside High, who maybe I didn't really see any guns or weapons, but I certainly saw a lot of jingle jangle.
Tons of jingle jangle.
Was this prison or a high school?
You know, it is shot like one of those movies like Class of 1984 or something, where it's just like the high school hellscape, and it's clearly the bizarro world of Riverdale, which Riverdale may be sort of shadowy and foggy, but it's at least cheery and, you know, kind of everything looks sort of like cleanly 1940s. But yeah, this is just like on fire, graffiti, just really horror bad. Show.
Yeah, so we see Jughead make that transition with Tony as his guide. And I can't help but think back to everything I've learned from teen soap operas like the OC. You know when Marissa goes to Newport, what is it, Newport or whatever, which one she had to transfer to after the weird, you know, when she was defending herself and they had to send her away because that's awful. She made friends with Johnny. We know immediately she's gonna hook up with Johnny.
Right.
So Tony, I see you for what you are, okay? Like I know why they introduced Tony, and I know why Tony made a comment about, you know, Betty being like, oh, I wouldn't have expected you. I would have expected
Emily the Strange.
Yeah, Winona Ryder from Beetlejuice.
Which is weird because I made an Emily the Strange reference earlier this week. It was like,
she's coming back.
Yeah, apparently.
And then you see that both of them understand Jughead to a baseline degree where they both bring the kettle. So I know what's coming and I don't like it.
Well, look, you can't have a teen show like this and have if you're shipping, like, get ready for heartbreak, because there's going to be a lot of breakups and reunions, and that's just how it goes.
I will be so distraught. I know they're breaking up Betty and Jughead. I can see it coming, and I'm really going to hate that.
If I've learned anything from 20 seasons of Degrassi, it's that. So
Yeah. So we see Jughead make this transition. We see Betty very worried about him. Betty's just very worried in this entire episode.
Well, you would think Jughead's whole thing was like, I'm going to keep my head down. It's like, oh no, I'm going to restart the student paper and I'm going to write about gangs and jingle jangle. Like, oh yeah, that's going to go well.
They're going to be fine. The Ghoulies are going to be fine with that. The Ghoulies, even worse than the Southside Serpents.
Yes, and you have to wonder, like, did the Serpents get the Ghoulies to beat him up so that he would hang with them, or
yeah, like what was the play there?
Yeah.
Because Tony said maybe now you'll take the Ghoulies seriously. And it does seem like if it wasn't orchestrated, at least they are using it as sort of a fortunate accident for the Serpents that now they have another serpent with them. A reluctant serpent.
Well, but I think the fact that he is the son of FP is powerful, that makes him a catch.
That's definitely a dynamic that the Serpents are drawn to, that sort of familial loyalty.
Right.
And they need Jughead to get on board with that, and he's just like, no, I'm just gonna be a loner. And they're like, well, look what happened.
That's not gonna last. I liked Fred's description of Hiram, how, like, if he wants to be offended, he will be. Like, they're like, okay, this guy's a fucking manipulator.
And we should talk about the note that was sent to
yes.
Cooper.
So the Black Mask, Zodiac style, reaches out to the local press, in this case Betty's mom, and explains that he shot Fred for being an adulterer. He killed the child predator, Mrs. Grundy, and the sex and drugs teens, Moose and Midge, which prompts Betty's sister to get the hell out of town because she's an unwed, quasi-incestuous mother. Poor Polly. I cannot catch a break, this girl. Polly, so she decides to skedaddle, and both the Sheriff Keller and the mayor are like, well, we can't publish that. It's like, too late. Yeah, it's on the front page.
I think I really like the treatment of this killer so far, because it's just ambiguous enough where it could be really anyone, because we know that Riverdale valued this moral high ground when we first met the town.
Right.
I have a theory on who the killer is. Can I say it now?
Why not?
Record. I'll just go on record now. I think that it is Mr. Cooper. I don't know why I think that. I just feel like in one of those shots, it really looked like his eyes of the black hood, and then I also think
he's a character who otherwise seems extraneous now.
Yeah, otherwise seems like, oh, what is he still doing there? It'd be a perfect sort of reveal, like, haha. And then also, I think that he does pride himself, as we saw the treatment of Polly, into keeping Riverdale pure. So I'm saying this episode 3, we'll see if I'm right.
Could be. I'm wondering if maybe there's a lost blossom we don't know about.
I honestly, every episode, I walk away wanting and needing more Cheryl Blossom. She's so good.
I don't want to get tired of her. I want like just a little seasoning with her. She's great though. She's giving us some primo, like, high school.
She's
very mean.
Regina
girl.
George for the 2010s.
There you go. She is all 3 Heathers in one.
All 3. It's a lot. She does it well, though.
She does. She pulls it off. All right. This is an excellent episode. So we hope you'll come back next week for more.